At the very beginning of this movie, we are dropped straight into the middle of chaos. It's early morning inside Shawshank State Penitentiary, and the daily head count is underway. Guards march through the cell block like clockwork, calling numbers, ticking boxes, routine, predictable, boring even, until one guard stops dead in his tracks in front of cell number 245. He calls the name. No answer. He calls it again. Nothing. He steps closer, grabs the bars, and peers inside, and what he sees makes the blood drain from his face. The cell is completely empty. Not messy, not ransacked, just empty. Like the man who lived there for nearly 2 decades had simply vanished into thin air. Within seconds, every alarm in Shawshank Prison is screaming. But here's the thing that will absolutely blow your mind. The answer to how this man escaped had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Right there, on the wall, behind a poster, and nobody saw it coming. This is the story of Andy Dufresne, a quiet, mild-mannered banker who walked into the most dangerous prison in America, survived things that would destroy most men, and then did something that became the stuff of legend. This is the Shawshank Redemption. We are introduced to Andy Dufresne not as a prisoner, but as a broken man sitting alone in a dark car on a rainy night, a loaded gun in his hand, and tears he's too proud to shed. Earlier that same evening, Andy discovered the worst thing a husband can discover. His wife had been unfaithful, and not just unfaithful. She had been seeing another man for quite some time. Drunk, devastated, and barely thinking straight, Andy drove to their location that night with the gun in his hand. He sat outside in that car, torn between rage and reason, and then he drove away. He never pulled that trigger, but someone else did. That same night, both his wife and her lover were shot and killed, and when investigators started piecing everything together, every single piece of evidence pointed directly at Andy. His gun, his fingerprints, his motive, his car spotted near the scene, even witnesses who saw him earlier that night. The problem? He was innocent. During the trial, the prosecutor dismantles Andy's defense with surgical precision. Andy's calm, composed demeanor on the stand, the demeanor of a man who genuinely didn't do it, somehow works against him. He comes across as cold, unfeeling, like a man with nothing to worry about because he already got what he wanted. The jury deliberates for less than 2 hours. Guilty on both counts. 2 consecutive life sentences. No possibility of parole. Andy Dufresne, age in his early 30s, is sent to Shawshank Prison. And from this moment on, the life he knew, the suits, the bank, a career, all of it disappears forever. We are shown the moment the prison bus rolls through those massive iron gates, and it feels like watching a coffin close. The walls are gray, the sky is gray, and the expressions on the guards' faces are even grayer. The new inmates are lined up in the yard while the older prisoners lean over the railings above, sizing them up the way buyers evaluate livestock at a market. Bets are placed on which newcomer will crack first, which man will break down crying on his first night in a place like this. Among the veteran inmates, there's a man named Red. He's been inside Shawshank long enough to know exactly how this goes. He watches the new prisoners arrive and immediately starts reading them. That big nervous guy near the back, Red picks him as the one most likely to fall apart. Everyone agrees. But then Red notices someone standing apart from the others. Quiet, hands in his pockets, eyes moving slowly across the prison yard like he's taking inventory of the place rather than being terrified by it. A slim, almost bookish-looking man who seems completely out of place among hardened criminals. Red changes his bet. He picks that man, Andy Dufresne. He loses the money that night. Andy doesn't cry. He doesn't scream. Not once. While the big nervous prisoner completely unravels and Captain Hadley, the prison's most brutal guard, drags him out of the cell block and beats him so badly the man dies from his injuries before morning. Andy sits in total silence. Red notices this. He can't stop thinking about it. What kind of man walks into Shawshank and doesn't even flinch? Weeks pass before Andy approaches Red directly, and when he does, it's with an unusual request. He wants a rock hammer, small, the kind used to chip and shape stones. Red, who has a side operation smuggling contraband into the prison, is immediately suspicious. Tools inside prison walls usually mean trouble. Shanks, weapons, escape attempts. He almost turns Andy down, but when Red finally sees the actual size of the hammer Andy's describing, he nearly laughs out loud. The thing is barely bigger than a large pen. Digging through concrete with it would take a lifetime. Red figures it's harmless, probably just a hobby, and agrees. What Red doesn't know, what nobody knows yet, is that Andy has already started measuring things in lifetimes. The hammer arrives. Andy begins his hobby, quietly in his cell, every night while the rest of the prison sleeps. But his nights aren't peaceful. Not by a long shot. A gang inside Shawshank known as the Sisters has selected Andy as their next target. Their leader, a dangerous man named Boggs, becomes fixated on him in a way that's deeply threatening. The attacks start early and keep coming. In the laundry room, in hallways, in blind spots where guards conveniently look the other way. Andy fights back every single time, which is somehow both admirable and devastating, because the fights always end the same way, with Andy hurt, bruised, and dragged to the infirmary. This goes on for years, but Andy never stops fighting back. Not once. Then comes the day that changes everything. Andy, Red, and several other prisoners are selected for an outdoor work detail, repairing a section of the prison roof under the hot summer sun. It's exhausting, sweaty labor. But what makes this particular day unforgettable is a conversation happening nearby. Captain Hadley, the same guard who killed a man on Andy's first night, is venting furiously to another guard about a financial windfall he recently inherited from a deceased brother. The money is significant, but taxes are about to consume most of it, and Hadley is furious. He's pacing, grinding his teeth, ranting about how the government takes everything. Andy overhears this, and despite knowing full well tell that Hadley is one of the most dangerous men inside those walls, despite knowing that approaching him uninvited could easily get him thrown off the roof. Andy does exactly that. He walks over. He asks Hadley one calculated question. Does he trust his wife? Every inmate in earshot stops breathing. Hadley grabs Andy by the collar and swings him toward the edge of the roof. His face says everything. He is seconds away from sending this prisoner off the edge without a second thought, but Andy keeps talking. He explains calmly that under tax law, Hadley can transfer the full inheritance to his wife as a tax-free gift, legally preserving almost every dollar. He knows the loopholes. He's a banker. He's telling the truth. Hadley slowly sets him down. A few days later, the prisoners on that rooftop sit in the afternoon sun drinking cold beers, courtesy of Captain Hadley. It is, by every account, one of the strangest moments any of them have ever experienced inside those walls. Andy doesn't drink a single sip. He just sits there watching his fellow inmates laugh and relax like free men. And there's something in his expression, satisfaction maybe, or quiet purpose, that is impossible to describe. Red says it best. That day, sitting under an open sky with a cold beer, it felt like they were just men fixing a roof somewhere, not prisoners, just men. And it was all because of Andy Dufresne. From that moment forward, Andy's reputation inside Shawshank transforms completely. Guards begin approaching him for financial help, taxes, savings plans, insurance forms. He becomes more valuable than most employees Norton could hire on the outside. When an opportunity opens up to work in the prison library alongside an elderly inmate named Brooks, Andy takes it immediately. The library is tiny, dusty, and largely ignored. Andy decides to change that. Every single week without fail, he writes letters to the state government requesting books, funding, and resources. Every single week, those letters are ignored. He keeps writing anyway. After roughly 6 years of letters, the state finally responds, not with everything Andy asked for, but with boxes of books, records, and a small allocation of funds. Most people would have considered this a victory and stopped. Andy considers it a starting point and immediately begins writing twice as many letters. Meanwhile, Warden Norton, a man who hides his cruelty behind scripture and pressed suits, begins using Andy for something far more dangerous than tax forms. Norton has been running an illegal labor operation for years, renting out prisoners to local contractors for practically nothing, while pocketing enormous profits. The money is significant, but it's also untraceable to anything legitimate. He needs someone who can make it disappear on paper. He needs a banker. Andy creates a fictional person, a man named Randall Stevens, complete with bank accounts, identification, and a legal paper trail so convincing that nobody would ever think to question it. Every dirty dollar Norton earns flows through Randall Stevens. Andy manages all of it, but what Norton doesn't know, and what makes this story so extraordinary, is that Andy quietly keeps a copy of every single financial record he creates. Every transaction, every account, every piece of evidence documenting exactly what Norton is doing. He stores it all carefully, patiently, the way a man stores ammunition when he doesn't yet know which war he's fighting. Two things happen around this same period that shake the prison to its core. The first is Brooks. Brooks has been inside Shawshank for 50 years. He is a gentle, quiet old man who cares for a crow he found injured in the yard and who has never caused anyone a moment of trouble. When the parole board approves his release, the entire prison expects him to walk out celebrating. Instead, Brooks completely falls apart. He grabs a fellow inmate and holds a knife to his throat, sobbing, begging not to be let out. Red explains what's happening in the quietest, most devastating way possible. Brooks hasn't just been in prison a long time. Prison has become his identity, his structure, his entire world. Outside those walls, he has no family, no friends, no purpose, and no understanding of a world that has moved on without him for half a century. Freedom doesn't feel like freedom to Brooks. It feels like being thrown off a cliff. He is released anyway, and what follows is heartbreaking to watch. Brooks tries. He gets a small apartment. He gets a job at a grocery store. He writes letters back to the prison because the people inside are the only ones he knows. But the world outside is loud and fast and indifferent in a way that feels nothing like anything he understands. The loneliness swallows him whole. One night, he carves 3 words into the wooden beam above his bed. Brooks was here, and then he is gone. The news reaches Shawshank quietly. Andy sits with it in silence for a long time. The second moment involves music. While working in the warden's office one afternoon, Andy discovers a classical opera record in a box of donated items. Something clicks in his mind. He locks the office door, walks to the loudspeaker controls connected throughout the entire prison, and places the record on the player. Then he turns the volume all the way up. The sound that erupts through Shawshank prison is something none of the inmates have ever experienced inside those walls. 2 women singing in Italian, voices soaring through the corridors, the yard, the cafeteria, the cells. Men who haven't felt anything beautiful in years stop completely and look up. Guards freeze mid-step. The whole prison holds its breath. Nobody understands the words, but every single person understands what they're feeling. Andy sits behind that locked door, feet up on the desk, eyes half closed, with a small smile on his face while the music fills every corner of a place built to crush the human spirit. The guards eventually break the door down and drag him to solitary confinement, 2 weeks in a dark cell as punishment. When he comes back out, Red asks him if it was worth it. Andy tells him some things exist inside a man that prison simply cannot reach. Call it music, call it memory, call it hope. Red says hope is the most dangerous thing a man can carry inside Shawshank. It drives people insane, he says. After decades of parole denials and broken expectations, Red has decided that hope is not a survival strategy, it's a poison. poison. Andy smiles at him and says nothing more. Years pass, the library grows into the finest room in the entire prison. And then, in 1965, a young prisoner named Tommy Williams arrives at Shawshank and changes everything. Tommy is loud, funny, and immediately lovable in a way that prison usually beats out of people. He has no education to speak of, and when Andy offers to help him study for his diploma, Tommy jokes around at first. But slowly, under Andy's patience, something changes in him. He starts to believe, maybe for the first time in his life, that he is capable of being more than what the world has told him he is. One evening, during a casual conversation with Andy and Red, Tommy mentions something from his past, almost offhandedly. Years back, he shared a cell with a man who loved to brag. According to this man, he had broken into a wealthy home during a robbery and killed both a woman and her boyfriend when they woke up. Then he laughed about it because the husband got blamed for the whole thing. A banker, the man had said. Andy goes completely still. Every detail Tommy just described matches the murders that sent Andy to Shawshank. The victims, the circumstances, the timeline, all of it. For the first time in nearly 20 years, Andy Dufresne is holding a thread that could unravel the greatest injustice of his life. He goes straight to Warden Norton. He explains everything. He begs Norton to contact the proper authorities and reopen the investigation. And here is where the story takes its darkest turn. Norton listens to everything Andy says, and then, behind closed eyes, he performs the coldest calculation a corrupt man can make. If Andy walks out of Shawshank, the entire financial operation collapses. Every illegal dollar, every laundered account, every buried secret, Andy knows all of it. He is, in fact, the only person who could dismantle Norton's entire world with a single conversation. Norton cannot let that happen. He tells Andy the courts won't believe it. Too much time has passed. The testimony of a criminal means nothing. Andy, for the first and only time in this entire movie, loses his composure. He stands in Norton's office and says out loud the thing that has been true since the day he arrived. He is an innocent man, and he has been locked in this prison to protect a corrupt warden's fortune. Norton's face closes like a door slamming shut. Andy is dragged to solitary confinement, and Tommy, a few nights later, Norton calls Tommy into the prison yard under the pretense of hearing his statement directly. Tommy, trusting, nervous, and completely unaware of the danger, confirms every word of the story. Norton steps to the side. A rifle fires from above. Tommy Williams collapses in the yard. The official story is attempted escape, but everyone inside Shawshank knows the truth. A young man was murdered to keep a banker silent. When Andy is finally released from solitary, Red sees something in his face that frightens him. Andy is quieter than he's ever been, emptier, like some essential part of him has been extinguished. That evening they sit together in the yard, and Andy speaks about a place in Mexico, a town called Zihuatanejo on the Pacific coast. He describes it the way a man describes a dream he's memorized. The color of the water, the smell of the air, a small hotel he would open, old fishing boats he would repair along the shore. He asks Red to come find him there someday. Red tells him gently that dreams like that will only destroy you in a place like this. Andy tells him something he will remember for the rest of his life. Get busy living or get busy dying. Before he stands to leave, Andy gives Red very specific instructions about a field near a town called Buxton. A large oak tree, a stone wall, something hidden beneath a black volcanic rock. Red doesn't fully understand what Andy's setting up, but the instructions feel weighted with something more than words. Later that night, a fellow inmate pulls Red aside and mentions something that makes Red's blood run cold. Andy recently asked him for a very long piece of rope. Red barely sleeps. He spends the entire night running through everything he knows about Andy. The hopelessness, the loss of Tommy, the solitary confinement, the exhaustion in his eyes, and he fears with everything he has that his friend has decided to stop fighting. That night, lightning splits the sky above Shawshank. Rain hammers the yard, thunder shakes the walls, and inside his cell, Andy Dufresne quietly begins the final act of a plan 19 years in the making. Here's what the prison missed and what the movie saves until the very end. The Rita Hayworth poster on Andy's wall, the poster that guards saw every single day for nearly 2 decades, was hiding something. The entire time Andy worked in his cell at night with that tiny rock hammer Red smuggled in for him, he was carving a tunnel through solid concrete, inch by inch, night by night. Every handful of dust and debris he chipped loose was hidden in his pockets, carried out to the yard during daily walks, and scattered casually across the ground where nobody would ever notice it. 2 decades, 6 feet of rock wall, a man and a hammer the size of a pen. The night of the escape, Andy packs Norton's laundered financial records into a sealed plastic bag. He switches his prison boots for a pair of Norton's polished leather shoes he had quietly kept. He removes the poster one final time. He crawls through the tunnel. At the far end, he reaches a sewage pipe deep beneath the prison grounds. He smashes through it with a rock, the thunder outside swallowing every sound, and then he crawls through nearly 500 yards of raw sewage in complete darkness. He vomits. He keeps going, because after 19 years, the other end of that pipe leads to something worth crawling through anything to reach. He bursts out into a river in the pouring rain. He stands up, he spreads his arms wide, and for the first time since his trial, Andy Dufresne breathes as a free man. The next morning, a well-dressed gentleman named Randall Stevens visits several banks in the area and calmly withdraws everything from a series of accounts. Over $370,000 disappears in a single day. Then, Andy mails everything, every financial record, every piece of evidence, every document detailing Norton's corruption, his crimes, his murders, to a regional newspaper. Back in Shawshank, Norton opens his private safe, expecting to find the evidence he's been protecting. Instead, he finds Andy's Bible. He opens it. Inside, carved into the hollowed-out pages where Andy hid the rock hammer for all those years, is a single note. "Dear Warden, you were right. Salvation lay within." By the time Norton reads those words, police cars are already pulling through Shawshank's front gates. Captain Hadley is arrested on the yard. Agents flood the administration block. The entire empire Norton built on stolen labor and buried secrets is coming apart at the seams. Dismantled overnight by the quiet banker he kept locked in a cell for 2 decades. Norton walks into his office, closes the door, and chooses the only exit he can think of that doesn't involve handcuffs. Time moves. Red eventually stands before the parole board again, his 3rd or 4th attempt after nearly 40 years inside. But this time, something is different. He doesn't rehearse answers designed to tell them what they want to hear. He doesn't perform rehabilitation. He tells the truth. He says the young man who committed his crime was a fool who didn't understand what he was doing or what it would cost. He says he thinks about it every day, not because it helps, but because it's real. The board approves his parole. Red walks out of Shawshank carrying a small bag and a whole lot of dread. The outside world is exactly as terrifying as Brooks warned him it would be. The noise, the pace, the sheer indifference of a world that kept moving without him. He gets a small apartment. He gets a grocery store job. He catches himself asking his manager for permission to use the bathroom, a habit carved so deep by 40 years of prison routine that he doesn't even notice himself doing it. Some nights, the loneliness gets so heavy that Red considers doing something criminal just to go back, just to go somewhere that feels like it makes sense. But he remembers a field near Buxton, a black volcanic rock, a promise he made. He violates his parole. He takes the bus. He walks through the hayfield until he finds the oak tree Andy described all those years ago. Beneath the rock, there is a box. Inside the box, there is money and a letter. Andy tells him that if he came this far, maybe he can come a little farther. Hope is a good thing, Andy writes. Maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Something shifts in Red at that moment. Something that had been locked up longer than he had been. Longer, maybe, than he even knew. He crosses the border into Mexico. He rides a bus south with his heart pounding and his hands gripping his knees the entire way. And then he arrives at a stretch of coastline so blue and endless that it looks nothing like anything inside those prison walls he called home for 40 years. And there, near the water, standing beside an old fishing boat, is Andy Dufresne. They walk toward each other without words. 2 men who survived something most people cannot imagine. 2 men standing in a place that was once nothing more than a dream, whispered in a prison yard, free, finally and completely free. And that, right there, is one of the greatest movies ever made, The Shawshank Redemption. A story about patience, about quiet strength, about what happens when hope refuses to be extinguished, no matter how much concrete and iron you stack on top of it. Now, if you watch this entire breakdown and you still haven't subscribed to this channel, come on. You just sat through 19 years of Andy Dufresne digging through a concrete wall with a tiny rock hammer. The least you can do is hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. Andy waited 19 years. You can spare 2 seconds. And if this video moved you, if any part of this story hit differently, drop a comment below and tell me which moment got you the most. Was it the opera playing through the prison? Brooks carving his name into that beam? Or Andy standing in the rain with his arms wide open? Tell me. I want to know, and I'll see you in the next one.